knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Shandarazamara me deyata gate gate paragate parasangate bodhiso baba gonjo zonji gai neme doji she baba doji meva doji shewa doji dragi baji me dumbe yu donji she lingori zo Girian onya ye yo yo da me do no be ye na yo da no mo rum ji mon zon zon yo ji ya ji re ya ra re le yo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Edam Guru Radha Mandala Gam Niradayami. Yadan Zaji Janam La Janju Madu Dani Yazuji Nagi Jenyem Nibezo Nam Jen Rola Benjil Zanje Rubar Yo Yadan Zaji Janam La Janju Madu Dani Yazuji Nagi Jenye Jibezo Nam Jen Rola Benjil Zanye Rubar Yo Yadan Jaji Janam La Janju Madu Dani Yazuji Nagi Jenye Jibezo Nam Jen Rola Benjil Zanye Rubar Yo.
What am I to the laundry? What the laundry row? That laundry that my chapel of that German, I just thought she had to be the ten and look at that. That laundry she had to be she then the look at that. But the la then the youth and la jibble to have to tell him to Marba. Tibetan hebelem go hebelem tu. Dan hebelem tu la chung da. Tomo la je din da. Tomo la chimi la je ba song de ba de. La ne chung on din da ju be je bu song de ba das. What the sajil what the did that what things Marba. Yeah.
So again we will be explaining Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. And we will do so by way of Lama Tsong-kha-pa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And when we look at Lama Tsong-kha-pa's text, we find within the outline, once we get to the section of training in the instructions, we find first the category of how to rely on the teacher that is the root of the path, and then how students train their minds once having relied upon the teacher. So underneath the section of how students train their minds after having relied upon the teacher, we find two categories: an exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, and then how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. And then in the section that deals with the how to, or the actual way to take advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, we find then the explanation of the persons of three capacity: training the mind in the stage of the past shared in common with beings of small capacity, training the mind in the stage of the past shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and then training the mind in the stage of the path for beings of great capacity. And these relate specifically to the introductory quote of Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, where we find in the introductory stanzas, understand that there are persons of three capacities: small, middling, and great. I shall write clearly identifying their characteristics. So here we begin the instructions on these three capacities. So underneath the section of training the mind in the stage of the past shared in common with beings of small capacity, we find three specific categories that begin this. First, the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity. Second, the measure of that training of thought of a person of small capacity, and then dispelling misconceptions related to the person of small capacity. And then under the first heading of the training and the thought of a person of small capacity, we find two specific categories: developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, and then secondly, relying on a means for achieving happiness in one's next life, or the method for achievement of happiness in one's next life. So this is the section that we're dealing with, and then we get to the topics of refuge and karma and its results. Less so. Less so. Less so. Less so. Less so. So then when we get to the section that begins to deal with refuge, the entrance into the excellent instruction, and then the second topic of karma and its results, we begin with refuge. First, with refuge, there are four categories. First, the causes for going for refuge. We've completed that first category, and we've shown that the causes for going for refuge are fear and faith. The next category is based on that, the objects to which you go for refuge to, and we've established the objects as the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then specifically Buddha Shakyamuni being the object that is explained. The next section deals with how one goes for refuge. And I'm sorry, so the objects, let me reverse. So based on that, the objects to which you go for refuge. So then we find the different categories that deal with the three jewels of refuge. First, going for refuge by way of knowing the excellent qualities. Next, going for refuge by way of knowing the differences. The third, going for refuge through assertion or through commitment. And then the fourth is going for refuge by not acknowledging other refuges. So these are the four categories that are dealt with extensively, and we've already gone over, related to how you go, related to based on that, the objects to which you go for refuge to. And then the next section that deals with how one goes for refuge has been complete, and then we now are dealing with the advices or precepts related to refuge. So we now are going to begin. Page 191. So on English, it's page 191. We begin with the precepts of refuge. So we've completed the causes of refuge, fear and faith, the objects of refuge, the three jewels, specifically Buddha Shakyamuni, and then how you go for refuge by way of knowing excellent qualities, differences, assertions, and not acknowledging other refuges. And now we're on the section of the advices on refuge, or the precepts of refuge. So just to clean the outline up to make sure for clarity's sake. So the precepts of refuge the outline begins on page 191. Okay. The knee. Okay, so one. Oh, okay. Okay, so. Okay. Ale, doa dang menga. Okay, so ale menga le jonwa. Okay. Doa ale doa le jonwa. Okay, so now we're beginning page 192. Once you have gone for refuge, the stages of the precepts. So it says the precepts are explained in two ways. First, how they appear in the compendium of determinations, and then secondly, how they appear in the oral tradition. So these are the 2 points. So how they appear in these two specific places.
토야 던도다 링기 토야 타바
Lesso.
안집이 쳔비 토야 안 사지 도도 말어 저순 전에 가르고 그러스나 저순 전에 제부 중의 중요한 제가는 예매이나 아니 먹을 좀 진짜 뭐도 최초로 가도저도 냐네제 제마도나 아니 디발자단지 어떤 제나 어때 던도라스 달라테네 던도르레 아니 라바소냐라제나 아니 타발도레 아니 테바제미 냐라제나 상제그레스 어떤 게 손대야데 라제 선물 라제세 답은 가서 다라가자 내나가로 다 다라가자 캔시던 템비던 어떤 네바이나 안 다라가자로 펠네 안에 다라 메테로 다 메데 안주로 메데 사고 투서든 사고리스 데네 칼란데 사주요 말에 근데 사주요 말 인도스 다다라 라자 어떤 답을 되는데 어떤 답이 있어.
So the precepts or advices are similar to how we find the instructions for persons of three capacities. So we find that the going for refuge is something that all persons of three capacities, those beings of small, medium, and great capacity, do. So when we look at the word advices or precepts, so the advices for the being of small capacity who wishes to have rebirth in the higher realms is going for refuge to the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, engaging in ethical behavior that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities and engages in the 16 definite goodnesses, and if one has engaged in a negative action, acknowledging his or her downfalls. So then we find these being the precepts or the advices given for the person of small capacity. The next is dealing with the person of medium capacity who wishes for liberation, and the advices or instructions are to engage in the practices of the three highest higher trainings, and by way of these practices one is able to achieve liberation. And then in the being of great capacity, one is able to achieve Buddhahood in dependence upon the Mahayana pathways. So these Mahayana practices or pathways become the advices. And it's very similar also to the action of going to see a doctor. When one goes to see a doctor diagnoses one's illness, such as cancer, and then the doctor says, eat this medicine, eat it at this specific time, and don't eat this food with it. All of these are the advices related to the prescription that the doctor has given to alleviate the illness. So these are very similar to what is meant by the precepts or the advices of refuge. So what you are advised to do if you have refuge.
So the
doctor gives a lot of advice. The doctor says, eat this food, don't eat that food. You should engage in exercise. So this is lapja, this is advice, or here precept. But lapja is also used as just advice when you look at it in the speaking sense. If you ask, as translators know, a teacher for advice, you say lapja, like give me some advice. So that's why I've chosen that other word as well.
That's what college in Jambayina, and then Unkalekale Shemur, Smarba, and then also Sajid 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 Rona, and Yabandu, Sajid Loli Abmana, Kutunda, Kamba Tizeti, Kamba Zukin, Tit Shemo Majuna, Kamba Chuchangur, Sajid, what the Ravan what the Sajid and Jew. It's important for us to initially be very clear and have within our minds this outline of the instructions. The outline of the instructions become like the basis for the construction of a house. So once one really holds within his or her mind this outline, then there isn't a mistake in order. And this is very important, to not mistake the order of the instructions, and the outline allows us to know the proper order without a mistake, and then be able to fill in the details and the explanations within that outline with all of the various more extensive points. But the outline becomes like the foundation of the building that's going to be built. For instance, a builder is building a building. If the foundation isn't appropriate and set correctly, then the house will topple over. Likewise, our practice will do the same if it's not held within our minds in the appropriate order. 사직에 사진을 주네 안다 나주 집이 중요주 링기주 집이 준비주도 전에 가르스 셰그레스 사진을 주가 이제로다 안은 사진이 와보자 아버때는 셰그레스 퇴비 주나 셰바주로 퇴비 딜도 봐주스 퇴비 딜도 보더니 되게 주딘지 라바된 거였어 퇴비 때문에 뭐 본서야 되게 다 돈이 라베미시네 신내 되고 땡겨지지 라바 퇴비 양한테 버토서야 되게 네 싫어질 라바 라바송데 땡고요스 어디서도 다가데 집이 중요 주시발 집이 중요 보셔도서 야버때나 아니 싫어스 돈주송을 자손주 주당 아니 먹을 주봉당 아니 뭐도 주주로 걸로 셰용그래 디발 사단지야 셰용그래 대 냐래 아버지나 ndebe denul dore labasun yale abajena and Tabalure, Teba Jimmy Lana Jena, and then Sanjigres, what Kalikal Shem was Sanjig land to something.
So the Buddha has stated, I'll give the quote later, but if we slowly look at these texts and we begin to hear the teachings and engage in the teachings, then we will be able to understand that through engaging in the practices of the pathways which are of persons of small capacity, such as going for refuge to the three jewels, and the explanation of this way one goes for refuge, and then engaging in ethical behavior of the 16 definite goodnesses and abandoning the 10 non-virtuous activities, and then acknowledging one's downfalls, one is able to achieve the state of the higher realm rebirth. By doing so, by engaging in the practice of the three higher trainings, one is able to achieve the state of liberation, and by engaging in the other practices of the Mahayana, one is able to achieve the state of Buddhahood. So we find in the quote that I'll get the quote later, just to not waste time, that deals with through the three higher trainings, and through hearing one. So I'll just move forward. But the point of this is that by slowly looking at these books and listening to the teachings and understanding them, then we will eventually be able to achieve the results that are stated are the results of the instructions that are being given.
What this is a May send Tombre, Jambu Horace, and then Pesatevina, Pesacatunda, the Ab, and then Saint Jenda, the Monroe, Yabashik,
the human basis has this mind which is very intelligent and very clever, and will be able to understand things in ways that other sentient beings wouldn't be able to do so readily.
What the Lubin Tender Comment, this is London, Duan Chuba, London Lad, Lai Yemi, Lamita, Kadin, the Mount of the Tushimis, Magi, and then Nabichu Lujani, Toba Naji Jigi, and the Lagat Humare, and then Lama Yumare, Kadin Yumare, and then Rinzita, Mount Toshitusule, the Yumare, May sent Janjure, Magi sent the Putabo, Lade, what the Magineba Najichi, and then Lata Lama Yita, Kadita, Rinzita, March to the Maris, what is on the Marve, Daman Roswa.
So we find that this human basis is the most appropriate basis for achieving aims, and we find that it is better than the basis of the gods or the demigods or the other Garudas and Nagas and so forth. And we find in Chenrezig's text, he posits that this human basis is the most appropriate basis from which we can do and achieve our goals.
What may send Nebachev do could Chitegi, you know, cook with Abushe.
So this shows the great abilities of the human mind and of the human mind and so forth that serves as the basis for which we will move forward. So the quote from Chenrezig is, with the human life you attain the spirit of enlightenment, which is the basis for the path to the state of Sugata, which brings great mental force and which equips you to lead all beings. Neither Nagas, demigods, Vidyadharas, Garudas, Kinnaras, nor snakes attain this path. So that's the quote from Chenrezig about the human basis. So that's on page 121. You can find that quote from Chenrezig. We went through that already.
Jiao Song Laba Shayu Rinpala Ni, Dua Le Jua Dang, Menga Le Jua Hus, Menga Le Jua Hu, Dambula Jiren Dua, Dua Le Jua Yu, Haja de la Jie. Dambula Jisen Ni Les, Jiji Jiba Ni, Jisen Ni Ren Dua, Jisen Ni. Ta Jisen Dambo, Jisen Ni Le, Ta Jisen Dambo de Terren Dua, Jisen Dambo de Jit Jo Sana, Jiba Damba La Tembas, Dambo Jignan Damba de Rendua, Jiba Damba La Temba, Saji Nondo, Saji, Jiba Damba La Temba, Damba J, Jignan Damba J, Dambi Chu Nieba said the Niba J, Suji Yila Sheba Sumba J, then the Chu Jesu to be Chu Druba was what is it? So when
we look at the subdivisions of the compendium of determinations, there are two sets of subdivisions. So the first set of subdivisions deals with four specific categories. First, the category of rely on an excellent person, or the highest or most excellent, the best person. Listen to the sublime teachings. Fix your attention properly on them, and then cultivate a practice that conforms with the instructions or conforms with the teachings. So there are 4 points that are made within the first set of subdivisions, beginning with rely on an excellent person.
Jibu Tamba La Temba Nes, Jisen Tambi Jibu Tamba La Temba Ne, Hansheba Tar, Shinyan Tamba, Yuten Taji Nesu Tone, Temba Tes, Shinyan Tamba Takan, the largest of Shinyan Temple to the Remedy, Jibu Tamba La Tensayate, Jibu Tajibu Chung Yina, Shinyan Jibu Tamba De, Jibu Chung Chu Shikan Ten Wure. Ndinane ndingi chushi genji genjil ten wure jibu chimbi yinane jibu chimbi chushi genjil ten wure jibu tambala ten basa do ting samarbe da inje shya doba yona inje shya genjil ten wure seri shya yina doba yoba yina seri shya genjil ten wure da dabu samarbe.
So here it starts with relying on an excellent person. It says, as previously explained. So that's dealing with devotion to a spiritual guide, which was previously explained in that chapter, or relying on a spiritual teacher. You rely on excellent teachers when you see them as the source of all good qualities, for you have already gone to the Buddha for refuge and thereby uphold the teacher of the path as your refuge. So here we have again this reliance on the teacher. So if we wish to understand the pathways of small capacity, we need a teacher who understands those. If we wish to learn the pathways of medium capacity, we need a teacher who understands those. If we wish to learn the pathways of beings of great capacity, we must have a teacher who understands those. In the same way, if we want to learn English, if we want to learn science, we have to have a teacher that understands these topics. So this is why we begin here, as previously explained, you rely on an excellent teacher. So it just begins with that point, the need for an instructor.
Jibu Tamba La Temba Nashiba Tar, Shinyan Tamba, Yuten Taji Nesu Tone, Yuten Taji Nesu Tone, Temba Des, and the Gagin De Wars, Sanji La Josu Song Yune, Sanji Josu Robaina, Sanji Josu Roba Tanji, Ne, Dendu Tutu Mare, Tabatu Tu Mare, Sanji Tu Mardas, Josu Song Yu, then Karagun Gagin Tengus, Gagin Matena, Chibichungu Chutan, Dingi Chutan, Chibichumi Chutu Shigmatis, the Shebala and Gagin Tengus, Lantambala Josu, Josu in Laza, Sanjila Josu Son Venus, Josu Son Sanjitu Mare, Dendu Mare, Tabatu Mares, and what the Gagin Tengus, Lantamba Laza. Chibichungu Lantokin, Chibi Lantokin, Chibunding Lantokin, Gigil Den Wures, Dembala,
Less so. So here it says, as previously explained, you rely on excellent teachers when you see them as the source of all good qualities. For you have already gone to the Buddha for refuge, and thereby uphold the teacher of the path as your refuge. So the teacher of the path here is referring to, here, if one wishes to engage in the pathways that lead to for persons of small capacity, one must have refuge, or the pathways which lead to liberation of medium capacity, one must have refuge, and the pathways which lead to Buddhahood for beings of great capacity, there must be refuge. So here, it says, uphold the teacher of the path as your refuge. So here, in order to understand the pathways for beings of small, medium, and great capacity, you have to have a teacher to give you the instruction. So we refer back to relying on the spiritual guide. So here it's stating that one is gone for refuge to the Buddha, which is necessary in the case of all of these pathways, but the teacher is necessary in order to explain these pathways that the Buddha has taught.
What the Sanjila Josu Songwine, Lantababula Josu Inlas, Tetan Jesu Tumbi, Ruba Shawane, Lantambala, Munso, Temba Yimisharosa, Tetan Jesu Tumbi, Sanjila Josu Songa, Tetan Jesu Tumbi, Nedruba Shawane, Lantambabula, Munso Temba Yimishar, Lantambabula, Tashin Tensuting Zamarba, Munso Temba Yimishar.
So then it says, upholder of the path as your so then the practice that it's so hard to not read it together because it binds together. For you have already gone to the Buddha for refuge, and thereby uphold the teacher of the path as your refuge. The practice that conforms with this is actual reliance on the one who teaches you, teaches the path to you. So here, this is referring to the teacher. Not in this case the actual instructor, the teacher, who is teaching the path that the Buddha has taught to us as disciples. So here again we're dealing with relying on a spiritual guide, or guru devotion, or reliance on the teacher.
What Niba Tambi Chuneba, Tachibu Chungu Chuneba, Dingi Chuneba, Chibi Chibi Chuneba to Sunjero, Takanju Tenju Pasatu Neba. The Tujung Sheraton or to Sunja Marba, Tambi Chunebas, to be Chuna Sheba Juro, to be Dili Dubajuro, to be Tamayin Babon, to be Yanganda Batus, what Sunga Mudu.
So once again, the quote, and again I'll get it at break just to not take time, it basically deals with through listening, this is achieved, through listening that is achieved. So here, when we get to this, listen to the sublime teachings section, here, listening to the teachings here is referring to listening to the teachings, listening well to the, listening well to the teachings or the Dharma of small, medium, and great capacity, and the teachings of the pronouncements of Lord Buddha and the authentic Indian commentaries. So here listening is so that one can achieve or gain the wisdom arisen from hearing. So this is the first point, and the first wisdom that arises, it comes from listening to these teachings, to the sublime teachings. Sublime teaching meaning those just mentioned.
Tambu tuba la tene, san lu mobu tane, san zhung shira, tele yana yana gude, gong zhung shira, chujin yila shibas, wata guguris, chujin yila shiba, wata le san zhung shira to gong zhung shira to zhung guza marbe, chujin yila shibas.
So the next says, fix your attention to them properly. And here, this means to place one's mind on them very well. And this is referring to the two types of wisdom, or the arisal of the wisdom arisen from contemplation, and the wisdom arisen from meditation. So fixing one's attention to, concentrating on, paying attention to, with one's mind, the sublime teachings. So these two wisdoms arise from contemplation and meditation. Less so. Less so. Shine Hlatong, Dene Gongzhong Shira. Okay, so fix your attention properly on them deals with, first one, here's the, for instance, we'll take the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, the Heart Sutra. One first listens to the instructions on the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Then one applies a large amount of analysis to it, using correct signs and reasons and so forth, and contemplates the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge very well. And then one arrives at an inferential valid cognition of the understanding of emptiness within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. And then one, at that level, has a union of calm abiding and special insight in one moment, in one moment there's this union of calm abiding and special insight at the same time that utilizes as its object of observation emptiness. So here we have the wisdom arisen from contemplation, and then that transforms into direct cognition, which then becomes the wisdom arisen from meditation. So this is the process to which these understandings arise. And one thing I left out before, topics such as the teachings from small and medium capacity, we would apply the same logic to the hearing, contemplation, and then the actual realization. And then there are many different topics. Rinpoche said the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths, the Two Truths, and so forth, that one achieves these various levels of realization related to from hearing, contemplation, and meditation. So then, when first one starts to understand here of emptiness, and then we have the wisdom that arises from this hearing, or this understanding that arises from hearing. But it's wisdom, but it's the wisdom is this understanding. So this wisdom that arises from hearing serves as an opponent to the grasping at true establishment. It's not as harmful to it as the realizations through inference and so forth, but it serves to slightly combat that grasping at true establishment. And then one goes through the various levels of analysis and arrives at the level of inferential valid cognition related to emptiness, and then this then starts to really serve as an opponent at the grasping at true establishment. And then there's this union of calm abiding and special insight that then has as its object of observation emptiness, and then one passes from this path of preparation that we're speaking of at this point to the path of seeing and so forth. So this is how these various wisdoms arise, and the stages that one goes through to the realization of the topics that one is becoming wise to, if you will.
then Naji, and Dai, then Tony to be Loda, Damage to Loda to Sukalo, Yabajing Hasuna, Timoton should know.
So just like a doctor who is a scholar can give you a medicine that combats tuberculosis or cancer or diabetes, these wisdoms, the Dr. Lhasa, the Doni Dupi Shira, Doni Dupi Lo. So the wisdom, the mind that the mind that realizes the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So the mind that realizes the wisdom realizing emptiness and the Four Noble Truths and so forth serve in the same way as like a medicine or an antidote to negativities. So it is very similar to this, no?
Niba the Somba dead, Niba Tambi Chu Yeba Jie, Somba the Chuji Hila Sheba Ures, Hila Sheba Neza, that gentleman is Tenema Rejidua. Tambi Chu Yeba said the Canadians, Tambas Hanji dance, Tambi Chu Nesa, Tambade, Sanji dance, Sanji dance, Sanji Jin Tuji Shebi, Chun Dodula Soba, Jeris Nyejins. And the Sanji should conjure to the Marbe, Ganjuji, Tea, and near Tuji Shiba Song do, Nagajuna the Sanga to Shabi, Tenju to the Marbe, Tenju to the Water, Niebatella, Tree Nebas, what the little Gores, Tambi Chu Neba, Tamba Sanji down, Sanji should conjure to the road. Sanji near Tuji Song do. That Nagajuna Nalenta came out to the Maribe. Not Jeremy Jero. Sanji near Tuji Shibis, that's Sanji near Tuji, and Nalenta came out to Sonja Pachambuare, Bill came out to Sonja Pachambuare, what to Zero. Near Tuji Shibi, Chun, Dodala Soba, Jeris Neba was, Dodon, Mobidon, and Dudon, what Jeris Neba. Obachata Gores on the Zad. Nia Jinsa. Can't Yila Shiba. That Chuji Yila Shiba's a Garisana. And can't Yila Shina. New Moba Dubi, maybe Yila Shiba Tessa. New the Chaginiabo, Shedanginiabo, Kondoginiabo, Tomoginiabo, Tekonanabo, Maribiniabo, Lendela Maribiniabo, what the Niabo to Yila Shibures. Tony Tune, Tony Santaba, in a Konanina movie, Maribel Never do. And Mataba Shene, Mataba Combaina, Tandil Never. What then Nazi Chukrashena, T. Luchu Nero. You more dubi, Miba Sheba, Suji Hila Sheba said, what the Yomo dubi, Miba Hila Sheba te, Chula just what about Sheba te, Chula just Sonwine. Chukunchula Josu Songine, London to be Chula, Modushawa, Zeba in Laza, Chukunchula, Pentan, Chukunchula Josu Songi, Josu Songa Zanji, Drutu Mardas, and what the Josu Songa Chukunchute, Chukunchut Lakazias and Longi Chukunchut, to be Chukunchunima. Don't be Tanju Nani, London to be Daniel. Tenzin Shetan Majetan, Ruba Shebakona, Longi Choko is not Kanju Marba Kanju, Longi Choko in a Kanju Michab, Kanju in a Longi Choko Michab, to be Choko in a line Michab, line a to be Choko Michas. Then also Tibetan got the Parang Parasang long at the Kanujaimba, what to say the Marba?
Okay, so. Here then we begin to have Lama Tsong-kha-pa's explanation of this. So it says, you should listen to whatever is appropriate among the sutras, the like, teachings which are sublime because the Buddha and the Buddha's disciples explained them. So here, teachings and the like, Buddhas and the Buddha's disciples. So the Buddha's teachings are specifically the Kangjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha. So when we look to what this is speaking of, this is the specific pronouncements of Lord Buddha. Buddha's disciples, explaining them here in J. Rinpoche's explanation, we would find that these are referring to the great masters of such as Nagarjuna and Master Asanga, but also the great scholars who are Buddha's disciples that we could refer to, who are Tibetan scholars and so forth. So other scholars. So Buddha's disciples, referring to the scholars who follow who explain and follow the teachings of the Buddha. So it says this is what one should listen to: the pronouncements of Buddha and those who have commented on those pronouncements, such as Nagarjuna, Asanga, etc. So here, when it says the teachings, we could be in the teachings, and what the Buddha's disciples explain would be referring specifically to the three baskets: the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the Abhidharma basket. So these are what the Buddha is teaching and these disciples are explaining literally. So then it says, in addition, fix your attention on whatever serves to dispel the afflictions, for you have already gone to the teaching for refuge, and you have thus undertaken to actualize both the verbal teachings. So this is specifically the scriptural Dharma and the realizational Dharma. So it says the verbal teachings and the teachings as they are realized. So when we look at this first point, fix your attention on whatever serves to dispel the afflictions, we know that there are various antidotes that the Buddha has taught. So for instance, the Buddha taught the antidote for attachment is on ugliness, and is meditation on uglies, and the antidote for hatred is love, and the antidote for delusion and so dependent origination, and so forth. And then the various types of ignorances. So it says serves to dispel the afflictions. So the various types of ignorance, the ignorance of karma and its results, and the ignorance of the nature of reality. So the different types of ignorance. So then, when we look at antidotes, specifically, meditation upon emptiness serves as an antidote to the grasping at true establishment. Meditation on impermanence serves as an antidote to the grasping at permanence, at things as being permanence or unitary, permanent. So here, when we look at the Dharma jewel itself, we look at the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma and the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma. We find these are two different things. So the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma is necessarily the Buddha Shakyamuni's pronouncements, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma is necessarily the paths. So when we look at the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we find the mantra that says Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha, that is showing the various paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So then below this, then there'll be more points that are very similar to these that we'll get into.
And Sanji Netuji Shibi, Tenela Sobas, Dudela Soson, Dudi, Nobi, Dun, Sanji Cattle Maduna, Dunason, Mosakan, Dunason, but there, and Casa, what in Rotama Maria. Mosakat Madugina, Dunason, Nobi, Dun, what to the lady. What the dinner somewhat there, and the London do is London longer about the sacred quandamus. Subijeva Inaya, and the Pentuba Yunguris, Kadan is a sage chawanda, drug conquer the what the second double headed would do.
So here, the pith of the instructions here that we're speaking of are these three baskets: the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, the Abhidharma basket. And we find Geshe Dron Tompa's quote about Lord Atisha, where we find that the explanation of the three baskets is a golden rosary adorned with the teachings or beings of three capacities, who will benefit anyone who read its beads, or something to that effect, or read its beads, or go through its beads. So here, this is showing how anyone is benefited by this instruction of the three baskets that are explained by way of the persons of three capacities. So this is Geshe Dron Tongpa commenting on Lord Atisha's teaching. Similar to this. So one fixes one's attention on those three baskets of the three baskets of the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the Abhidharma basket. So one fixes one's mind on this because it says whatever serves to dispel the afflictions. So what dispels the afflictions? The wisdom realizing emptiness dispels the afflictions. The wisdom realizing impermanence dispels the afflictions. And all sentient beings wish to have happiness and not wish to have suffering. And suffering comes about from the afflictions. So if one applies antidotes or opponents that serve to dispel the afflictions, then these serve to dispel, when we look at the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering and the superior truth of origin being karma and its afflictions, if one gets rid of those karma and afflictions, then one gets rid of the suffering and so forth. So here this shows how to, because sentient beings want happiness, the afflictions must be eradicated in order for them to have this happiness. So we'll take a short break, and we're going to just get started, everyone. I'm going to read the quote. Rinpoche quoted the collection of indicative verses, and it's specifically the verses about hearing in the collection of indicative verses, the Udana Varga. And it says, through hearing phenomena are understood, through hearing wrongdoing is overcome, through hearing what is meaningless is eliminated, through hearing nirvana is attained. So Rinpoche quoted that twice, and I didn't want to misquote it, and I knew it was in the book, and I was looking in the wrong section. So thank you, John, for helping me to find it, and so that's the correct quote. And it's on page 56 in the English of the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. Decent.
Yeah. Jesen dambu dambula temba, dambi chu nyeba, chuji yela sheba, songje. Ta jibu dambula temba ta shinyen ten su ten de duwa. Ten dambi chu nyeba sa de chu la jiao su song zangje ane yong mare, dambi chu nyen lo jong je wu de psa ta wu res. Ane di de da de chuji yela sheba, nyomo do bi che do. So
when we go back to the where we are, page 192 to 193, the first set of subdivisions, we find first the point of relying on excellent persons. So here we find the explanation again of the reliance upon the spiritual teacher, relying on guru devotion. So the next part deals with listening to the sublime teachings, so listening to the instructions, the teachings that are given. But just listening to the teachings is not enough. One needs to then fix one's attention to those teachings. So this is the third point that's made, fixing one's attention to the teachings. So these are the three we've gone through so far. And I just want to finish reading this just in case we're moving on. The last sentence. The practice that conforms with this is listening to and fixing your attention properly on the sublime teachings. I didn't read that last line in case we're moving on.
then Dambi Chunya, but the Chujin Yela Shiba,
so.
Dambi Chunya, but Chujin Yela Shiba need there, and German de Hijondua. Dambi Chunya, Damba Sanjis, Sanji Chunya, and a Kanju to Marbe, Damba Sanji Daha, Sanji in Twitches on to Nalenta Cable of Luba, Sanju to Marbe, near Twitch Shibi, turned out the Yabu Neba Jena. Jing had us on a Ulma Kangation or the Ulma Matane she was. Turned out put up she would do it. Put up the Natasuna or Ulma Kanga double.
So if we understand what the points that are made at this beginning part, then later points that are going to be made will be very clear and much more easy to understand. So we begin with this first set of subdivisions, the reliance upon the excellent persons, relying on the teacher, and then listening to the sublime teachings. So here, and then fixing your attention. So it says you should listen to whatever is appropriate among the sutras, the light, the teachings which are sublime, because the Buddha and the Buddha's disciples explain them. So here, speaking of the Buddha's teachings, of the Kangjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and what were pronounced, the three baskets of the Vinaya, the Sutra, and the Abhidharma basket, and who are the Buddha's disciples that explained them, Nagarjuna and all Asanga and the great Indian pandits and so forth. So these are the teachings that one is to listen to and then fix one's attention to.
What that Tamba Sanji Jinya Tuji Shibi, Chun Dodo La Soban, Dodo Dunus Tene, Du Dunu, Mobi Dunu Shulden Dua, La Soba Chius in Yajis. Hila Sheba, Tsujin Hila Sheba said the Hila She Kai Hila She Nasi, Hila Sheba's Candesan Candegil Somba Resina, Kan Hila She Na, Numo Dubi, Miba Hila Sheba, this Numo Capicheto, Numo Vinebo, Hila Shebus, Tony Guna, Takona Maribi Nebo, Ndogro, Tene and Ju Samba Jalajena, and know what the Kazu Mambo Tendege, Nyamu Nebo Hila Shegures, Miba Hila Shebate, Chula Chazu Son Yune, Chula Chazu Son Yune, and Chazu Son Gubate, longtemps to be Chula, no de Shawan Zima in Lassa, longtemps to be Chu, no de Shawa, Zimas. That long to be Chu, Tangason Tubanis go Marbe. Long choose a candy to the jet. To be choose not so long, Jolan, Tolan, Mulan, Malula. What is looking at Sosu Jula, Jibi Chet, or what the Gongo, something said.
So the Tambo Chirangare Sumpre, the Lungi.
La
Lungi, the Lung Dang Dupi, the Lungare Sumpre.
Long Tessimalon. Chula Chazu Son in the Lonsana, Longi Chuku, Longi Chuku, Chugurova, Longi Chuku, Kanju to the Marbe, Longi Chuku, Longi Chuku, to be Chuku there, and then you do Tolan, Malula, Rajaji, Shanseji, Sanji Galan to be Chuku Marbe, Longi Chuku, Lujan Jene, Goba Karasana, and then Tolan, Susu Julian
so here it says then, so one, it says the appropriate sutras and the like. So the teachings that one is listening to are those teachings, and if we look at the summary, the teachings of the three baskets of the Vinaya Sutra and Abhidharma basket. It says, in addition, fix your attention on whatever serves to dispel the affliction. So it says the object of observation, or the object of one's attention, is whatever is an antidote to the afflictions. So the object of observation of one's attention is whatever gets rid of afflictions, or is an antidote to the afflictions. So here, this is what is being spoken of. So for you have already gone to the teaching for refuge, and you have thus taken to actualize both the verbal teachings, so to actually have a direct, valid cognition of these. So the actualizing, direct valid cognition of the verbal teachings, so the teachings that Buddha gave, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and the teachings as they are realized. So the realization of the teachings that we find within the continuum of the hearers, solitary realizers, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So the realization of the path of accumulation of the hearers, solitary realizers, or bodhisattvas, the path of preparation, the path of meditation, the path of seeing. I'm sorry, let me redo that. So it's beginning with the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning, found within the continuums of the hearers, solitary realizers, bodhisattvas, and then the actualized realizations within the mind of the Buddha. So these are the realizational pathways, those pathways within the continuums of those beings. Decent.
London to be true, not to shower. London to be true, or the not to shy chetos, or Julian Cheto, not to show on the way last. That not just Tumba, Rubasha and Dame Rosa. Chula Chaos on you, that not just Rosa at what the little cool is. Long cheto to be true to so, and then Sosu Julia Cheto, not to shower Mariba, Tona Julia. Or then again, Gubati Cheto and the Langongores.
Less so. So since one has gone for refuge, one is already undertaken. If one is going for refuge, one is making a commitment or undertaking the task of actualizing or realizing the scriptural and realizational doctrines. So here, within one's own continuum. So here speaking specifically to one's own continuum. For you have already gone to the teaching for refuge, and you have thus, and so therefore, since you have done so, you have also undertaken the task to actualize it, actualize them, or realize them.
That's
so.
Chula Joseph Lodella, Chula Tuba down 3 years, Lajanid, Ganilla Joseph said there, and then Ganit Jodu in the room, Jodu in the rook, so the down also Kashi Gaganta Wure, and then Chudugo Marba. Tajibado, the Ganilla Joseph Lodella chose and a Chuji Jesu to me, Chuduba, the Chuji Jesu to Nietu Baba, Raja Baba, and Ganu Conju, Shansen Baba, Sanji Baba to Soge, and Chuji Jesu Tumbi, Ruba Seatote, Nyangan Deba. That Yandi, the Laji Yandi, the Lame Yandis, Nijan and Digre, and the Sanji Menebi Yandis, Numo but the Shi Deva Maleba Pombi, Yandi Jija, and the Numo Pombi Yandi Euro. Koa Pombi Yandi Euro. And what the Nyangal Devas, Nyangal Devada, Yandi de la Haji Yandi, Lame Yandi, Menebi Yandis, and the Raji Yandi, what the Jujugun in Mamuja, passing go to the own Mamuja, Raji Yandi, Menebi Yandi, Haji Yandi, Lame Yandis, Mamuswa, the Catuluate, Nyangal and Devi Jesu Bason du, Nyangal Devan Godemar, Goden, Sis Burbajurba, Sis Geneva. Tu Jesu to be Jesu Druba, Tu Nyangal and Devi, Chu Conjula Ena, Goden and Ladeni Marba, Goden Chugonjure, Laden Chugonjure, Chugonjuina, Goden and Ladan Kamicha. Chasla Guru, what the Tanyangal Devas and Goden Go. Chu Nyangal Devi Jesu Tumba Druba Teza, Nyangal Deva Turichito, Tal Haji Yande, the Hamena, Kanta, Tatubate, Menebi Yande, Nyomo but the Shiji Deba, Bombi, Yande, Tubichito, and Chudugures, Tumba Druba Te, Ganila Josu Son Yune, Ganila Josu Son Yune, Nyande su Dribi, Kanzala Trosu in Lassa. 냥을 대봐 안에 코아 보면 냥에서 드비 가자라 로번세바 추루 말아 추루 담아 브랜드 상지 매마다 버스 추데 맨다 버스 그니죠 두빈다도 세데도
That's it. Lache pombo yure, lame pombo yomare.
하지스나 들다 당아주 나투는 찾아보이나 나주 녀모 보이나 단다 그이 된도 여러다
Less so.
어때 녀모 본사를 다좀 찾아서데 그이 된도 하도요 하지스 하지다 좀 봐. 근데 본것도 본소나 하면 돼.
Okay. So
어떤 데서 그거다.
Okay, so then, so the first, if we look at this related to the three jewels, the first deals with the Buddha jewel, the second deals with the Dharma jewel, and the second is combined into two, listening to the sublime teaching and fixing your attention properly to them. And then the next, cultivate a practice which conforms with the teachings, is related to the Sangha jewel. So if we look at the Dharma jewel is divided into the true paths and true cessations. So if it is the Dharma jewel, it is among those two. It is any among the true paths or true cessations. So this is the Dharma jewel. The Sangha jewel is referring to those Aryas, those superior beings of the hearers, solitary realizers, Bodhisattva superiors, and Buddha superiors. So this is what is referring to when we say the Sangha jewel, or those aspiring to virtue. So those who are aspiring to virtue would be divided into those four categories. So here, it says you should practice in accordance with the teachings on nirvana. So there are many different types of nirvana. We find the Hinayana nirvana, foe destroyer with remainder and without remainder, and the unexcelled nirvana, which is that of the Buddha. So the with remainder, meaning that if we or a being has abandoned all of his or her afflictions, but still has this cyclic existence basis, the remainder of this aggregates, this basis of cyclic existence, then this in that category would be referring to with remainder. Without remainder is once the remainder of the basis is discarded, and so here we're speaking of the nirvana where the afflictive obstructions have been abandoned, and then there's the nirvana of a Buddha, the unexcelled nirvana, which is the removal of the obstructions to omniscience and the afflictive obstructions where one has achieved the state of omniscience. So, and then there are many other different categories we can find in the perfection of wisdom instructions of the various different levels and types of nirvana. So we can look to those for explanation. But it says then, when you have gone to the community for refuge, you have thereby taken on companion persons who are on the path to nirvana. So here we're referring to spiritual friends or spiritual companions who are also on this pathway. So here, when we go back to the analogy, we find that the Buddha is like a doctor, the Dharma is like a medicine, and the Sangha are like helpful friends or companions, or sometimes say nurse. But here the word companions are used, so spiritual friends. Didang Jesu Losarbe.
Tadna Jesu Timbe Druba Shawane, Ganila Chosu Sonyu, Tadna Jesu Timbe Druba Shawane, Tabi Sheto, Shoba Natan Timba Wus.
Lasso.
Ganila Chosu Sonyu Tene, Druba Shawane, Kuala Tabi Sheto, Nyande Tobi Sheto, Goden Tobi Sheto, and Shoba Natan, Nyande Tobi Sheto, Nyalaje Tatan, Timba, Nyalaje Wurus, Timba Lugurus, Timba Nyalaje Wurus. So the practice that accords with this is the training in the way those who are intent upon liberation. So those aspiring to virtue, it says that those who are aspiring to virtue are intent upon liberation, intent upon achieving the state of liberation. So it says what they practice is a practice that liberates one from cyclic existence, a cessation which is a cessation of cyclic existence. So this is the practice that accords with this, is training in the way of those who are intent upon liberation, so for the achievement of liberation. Jiseni Bandaredwa. Jiseni Nibi, Ombo Mogoba Shawanis, Ombo Mogoba Shaw. Ombo Mogoba Shaw, Tom Marbe.
Less so.
Ombo Mogoba Shawa Tan. Labi Ji Hanta Lambra Shawa. Sijela Nijo Shawa. Tuso, and Kunchu Chabala, Jamba Shaw, Jitredwa, Jigdone, that Tambote, Ombo Mogoba Shawaze. Najil Mujender is on it. Jitani be Ombo Mogoba Shawane. Ombo Mogoba Shaw Demarang, she want to go back. Things going, things the tune, she want to go back near. She want to go back. What to go back to let them do it. She won't go back. That's why you go to Jilamine, things go by Hina until Madebaji, Chapion, maybe Jendala, put the azure water, go back. Goba Goba the car, whereas Goba the Makana,
Chapa
dear the Jetume, Zerota,
Lesso.
Ombu Yula, Bayanso Son Yu, Jeso, Yidran Neza, Ombu Yula Bayanso, Tai Kadun Daman, Tonsi Galo, Santamayina, what the thing is that you have a young wish, Marvata. Jeso Yidran Neza.
This or that.
Yunala, Gobala, Junto Tennis, Damara Santana, and things in but the Towers. Junto Tene, Isher, Shubo, Gobal Cows, Gobal Kane, Neba Damara Santana, Jumaris.
Lesso.
That's also Pajana Tarina, Pajatan that Jibul Santa, Tanu Gongina, La Jibul Santa, Tony the Gongina.
So it says, now we are into the second set of subdivisions. It says, do not excite your sensory faculties. So when the sensory faculties draw the inattentive mind to objects, you should view this excitement with regard to sensory objects as a fault and withdraw the mind from them. So here, excitement is one of the two obstacles to achieving single-pointed concentration. We have excitement and dullness, or laxity, or dullness specifically. So excitement and dullness. So then, within those two, we're speaking of excitement, and this is the mind being drawn to various objects. And not one specific object. So when it says various objects, it's meaning scattered to the mind being scattered to various different objects and not fixing one's attention on one specific object. If the excitement and this mental busyness, sometimes translated, then serves as a fault or an opponent to single-pointed concentration. So one wants to, the object is to be able to fix one's mind on a specific point. If one is looking at the meaning of a text, one should be specifically fixing one's attention on only that. If one is meditating upon emptiness, one is fixing one's mind only on emptiness. If one is meditating upon a deity, then one is fixing one's mind only on that object. Excitement or wandering then is an opponent to single-pointed concentration. So one should, here it says, when this happens, recognize that it's a fault. Recognize that this excitement or wandering is a fault, and then withdraw the mind from that. And, stop it. Abandon abandon this attachment that one has. So it says, whenever any of these attachments happen, withdraw the mind from it and stop that.
Pachal San the Tabina, Pachal San Yabut Saltan to the Chapion Damada Jenda Ten, Kosan Jendan Road, Goba Marba Goba.
It says that. Yeah, just too long.
That Pachal Dulon Jen, Telecoat, Canere, Santan, Kosan Tata Santan du, Yan San Jenda Ten.
So when we speak of what excitement is when we're trying to just study and we're trying to look specifically at one text, for instance, but then our mind becomes attached to all of these other objects. This is what we need to withdraw the mind from and place it back on what we are trying to focus on. So here, this is what is meant by that as a fault, and withdraw the mind from them. Less so. So here, we're being taught what meditation is. It says first we rely upon excellent persons, and then we listen to the sublime instructions, and then we think about them, and then we fix our attention on those instructions. And then it says cultivate or practice which conforms with the teachings. So this is meditation. This is how we meditate. It shows us right here how to do so. So when we think about these things again and again, if our mind is distracted and becomes attached to other objects, then this is excitement. But if we can get rid of that, and then we can really fix our attention on this one specific object, we can achieve the state of mental pliancy, or a mental peace, or mental pliancy. Mental pliancy. So when we look at analytical meditation, we first have this topic of relying upon excellent persons and then listening to sublime teachings. And we would debate these topics and debate them from all of these different ways of looking at them. And this is meditation. This debate that's taking place is analytical meditation, because it's taking an object and looking at it in these different ways. And if you do a lot of debate, then you have a very solid understanding of what these points are. You really understand what these are. And so debate, when you're looking at it in all these different ways, there's a note, you have a solid way of understanding them. So then if you look at it, it is the reason is this, the reason it's not that, the reason that this doesn't exist, the reason that doesn't exist. You have a lot of ways that you can say it's sa, where your logic is broken, and you have a lot of ways to learn when you're looking at it. The reason it's this, the reason it's not that, etc., etc. You're constantly breaking what you think you know. And then you will then be able to have a very stable, solid understanding of this.
Labije yantaba lamba shawane sanji jebi labije jinus lamba wosa da sanji jebi je yantaba lansa ta magujubum chudinlana digojire genye dumbalana digore nyene dumbalana digore glomai dumbalana digore gloma gchubama shanseng dumba khag dumba kalena digore suzugo ombuda tumba lengores.
So then the next part, after do not excite your sensory faculties, withdraw the mind from them, from the excitement, then deals with taking up the precepts correctly. So here, precepts speaking of the vows and commitments and so forth. It says you should take up the training set forth by Buddha, as many as possible. So here, if we look at the individual liberation vows, we have the 1 day vow. We have the householder vow for a male, householder vow for a woman, novice male vow, novice female vow, the probationary nun's vow, and the fully ordained monks and nuns vows. Then we have bodhisattva vows. Then we have tantric vows. So it says as many as possible. So as many as one can keep. So this is what is being taught. And Rinpoche mentioned the 8 individual liberation vows, the bodhisattva and the tantric vows.
Da somba terendua. Somba se da senje la ni jawa jawa ne. Jayu tema ni cheba cheba yimbe. Ne konju son la chao son do sa du senje ne se jeju mares. Insare. Ni cheba chebe. De la chao son yu jang chao son yu jang senje la ni zawa she de. So bon was senjen no ba jeju mares no so bon hurus ba da also sanjig laja le jendal josu no jiga mares ji she de da mo de chula josu son yu de ne chu na ji ji chu gon ge yang le ja hurus gene la josu son yu ane wo de chula josu senjen la no so bon ba so de ba de So it
says the conqueror's teaching is distinguished by compassion. So here we previously went on the section of not going for refuge to not going for other refuges, or not acknowledging other refuges. So it's here the conqueror's teaching is distinguished. So here it shows how it is distinguished by compassion. Therefore, once you have gone to his teaching for refuge, you should also be compassionate towards living beings and forsaking harming them. So here this is saying that once one has gone for refuge, one shouldn't harm another living being. One shouldn't do any harm to a living being. So this is because it is distinguished by compassion, and one goes for refuge to the conqueror. So therefore, the conqueror is compassionate, and and because we're a follower of the conqueror, we should engage in the similar activities of non-harm.
Da nga zu da nyama tabale ana nga zu suje shela no de ji chue de yorwa wo de zo ga phu de ya oma zula ana wo de choba beja ba ina tri jo abrilo no ri mara de du jena wo de jeb ne tu na wo de du choba le jo ba zo de zare da nga zu nyama tabale khala sa phu ta se sagre 네, 통화 부터 다시 통으로다. 디 쳐봐 부대 건줄 쳐봐이나. 아니 사지에다 삼마지 취주에다 삼마지 게뉴에다 삼마지 파비게다 삼마지 발라 대시베 나바메 바 삼마지 나다신도 조주스 어디 쳐봐들 편치 보여서 what is in samarbe.
So then, the next part is strive to make periodic offerings to the 3 jewels. Each day you should make offerings to the 3 jewels. So whenever we engage in our food or drink, we can make all of these things that we use an offering by reciting the Om Ah Hum 3 times and then saying, I offer this to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But it's important for us if we wish for it to be meaningful, when we make this offering, think of these excellent qualities of the Buddha. Think of the excellent qualities of the Dharma. Think of the excellent qualities of the Sangha. What are the excellent qualities of superiors? What are these? And then when we make this offering, it's more meaningful.
Da chuji nyangame wote loju jiando da. Ana ngama lo wote chuji nyangame ge kujuji 보고도 제만 잡으세 되어서 보고 제만 잡으세 돼 아니 사지 가래인지 사지 배우이 말해 사지 배우도 보고도 어때 사지 배송스다 아니 가서 사지 줘봐 배우고 그랬어 아니 보고서 배워줘요 말시마 셔마 배우고 저렇다 셔마 배우고 사지에 고소를 뭐로 혼전도 쓰는데 안 상지 보고서 가르치 온다 대 상네 안 보고지 마고고지 지다가는자 셔마데 사지를 혼자 누버스 안 사지를 혼자네 셔마데 kennen ane sharibina karin jil what the children what the children what is not the latene and the children jema bogo children marba ashoka what the jabukira shibishuma what the jude
Sanjay, the Gonjadu, the
Sanjay pen the Lonze now the
Lunzi. Oh, the bull, Gonga Mepachik.
What the non the Buya Lego Maro?
Lessa.
Chita was that. And the Lonze.
Ale, the poop.
Okay,
so then there's the story of the power of making offerings we find in the previous stories of when Buddha was alive. And there was a story where there were children who were playing and Buddha arrived. And the children didn't have anything to offer to the Buddha, and the Buddha had his bowl, his begging bowl. And it was taller than the children were able to puguni. So it was taller than the children were able to put it into. So one child made a platform for the other child to stand on him, and they only had sand to offer. So they placed some sand into the begging bowl as an offering with good motivation. And Rinpoche said, not sure Mogiputra or Shariputra was able to transform this sand into paint and paint an entire monastery with this sand that had been offered. And as a result of this child making this offering with the intention of making an offering to the Buddha, because Rinpoche said the Buddha is here, what should we give? They wanted to make an offering. Because of this, the child who made the offering of the sand was born as King Ashoka. Then Pugu Nipa the Gari Jewa Gari.
That is not what you did. I can't see my Pugu Jabu Ashokal.
Then
Ashokal Chin Jabu Kila
Lesser.
Jagal Chutan Shiwakas in the Shima. Shema Chutan Shema Momo say. Chutan Momo Jaga Waranasatan, Buddha, the Kalo, during to Abjuka, during the Sanjig name, sir. During within the zoo, the Legatin, the Sanji Chukukas names, and the Sanjis are names. Ashuka during Momu.
So we find that then as he was born as Ashoka is responsible for making a large amount of stupas and so forth in India. And you can find this writing on the stupas that tell of this when you go and visit the various stupas that Lord Ashoka, King Ashoka had built. And this was a direct result of the virtue of making this offering to the Buddha. So, and because we do this so frequently, Rinpoche said before, when we offer our food and drink, it's of great benefit. It's very beneficial as an offering. One small child made an offering of sand to the Buddha and became born as the King Ashoka. So if we make offerings, then we will be able to have similar results.
How
they appear in the oral tradition. Page 193. Oral tradition. Menga oral tradition.
Susu Laja Dan, Tomunga Laja. Susu Laja Sena, Sanji Kunju, Chukunju, Genikunju, Susu Laja. Tomunga Laja Sena, Kunju to Tomunga Laja. Sabra Shawa was that Ambula Ni Gabi Laja, the Drubi Laja. Susu Laja de la and Gabi Laja, Drubi Laja Nindua. Tambo and Nyangalende Bale, Kanji son la Janrua, then other Kenyates, Nyangal de Kanju Longe d'Antua, Nyangalende Bales, and Kanji son la, Kanji is Chu Kanji, Makanji, Kanju son la, Josu Joa, then other Kenyans. Tangas Johnson to begin said in Zerba. Guinea, Naji should begin, Tanga should begin, Piji should begin, Yondu should begin, Nayuruna. De Judijuan Ena, Yanda Guinea said, and also John Duki Domana, which is the other in Zerba. Then Yanda Guinea this, Johnson's in beginning. Guinea, De Judijuan and Nayaman, Haji, Nanga, Piji should, Yondu should, Sanju down. Not paying, but they usually go in Guinea Mare, Guinea, Sancho Guinea, Yondu Guinea, Column Channel. Haji should be Guinea, Naga should be Guinea, Johnson, Guinea, Guinea, Meta was on the model, Guinea one a month.
So there are 5. Let me start here. So now it's how they appear in the oral tradition. In the oral tradition, the precepts are divided into special precepts and general precepts. So it says the special precepts are divided into 2. The special precepts are divided into 2. The proscriptive precepts and the prescriptive precepts. So the proscriptive and the prescriptive. So it begins with the proscriptive precepts, and then we find a quote from the Kangjur, from the Great Final Nirvana Sutra. It states, those who go to the 3 jewels for refuge come closer to the truly virtuous. They never go to other deities for refuge. Those who go to the sublime teaching for refuge harbor no harmful, murderous thoughts. Those who go to the community for refuge do not associate with non-Buddhist philosophers. So here, when it speaks of going for refuge, come closer to the truly virtuous. When we look at the householders' vows, we can say that there are 5, but actually, and I don't have all the names, I'm going to have to look it up, but there are actually 5, but only 2 of the first are actual householder, and the other 3 are just nominally designated as such. So they have specific names, which I'll look up at another time.
So here it speaks of not going for refuge to other deities, not going for refuge to worldly gods. And at the beginning of the LamRim Chenmo, it has a quote, possibly from the Patu, from the excellent praise of the excellent qualities of the Buddha, and praise of the exalted one, and it states that how can you go for refuge to a worldly god that is bound himself or him or herself to cyclic existence? So because they aren't free, they are not appropriate for refuge. So this is what is meant to never go to other deities for refuge. It's speaking of the worldly deities who are bound themselves to cyclic existence. So it's okay to ask for help or make an offering, an offering for aid to worldly deities, but not to go for refuge to them. So we can ask for help, we can ask for, make an offering to ask for some help, but not to go for refuge to them. 더 유라도 최고로다. 유라도 뭐죠 라스가에 이제 말로 아.
Yula.
local deity.
Okay, local deity.
Local deity is not what the Robichi Laro, just Manduna, what then the Digus.
The song, the chupa.
Insane apple.
No, okay. Just want to make sure. So in my area in Tibet, we make an incense offering to local deities for help. So we find this practice, but not an actual going for refuge to them, just a request for help from local deities. We find this practice in Tibet.
The Shiba, what the Jezid and goddess and issues of logic and issue Laji Madu Kenaga Yamaru. La Momo years ago,
Yishu.
Yishu, Quishis
Yishu, Ha Chi.
Laji. Laji Madu Laji Nazu.
Drabudu. Jenda Yomar, yeah.
Oh, the Suletangazu. Chubabu Nangazu, Robuji, which is on Digros.
So then, when we find in the Christian tradition with the God, and we find in the one God, and then in other religious traditions we have many different gods. We have Jesus also in the Christian tradition as a being. So it's okay as Buddhists we make offerings and ask for help to these beings, but not to go for refuge to them. To ask for gupa, protection for help, but not to go for refuge. Gupa, ropache, drabudue. Okay, so a liking for, a faith in, but not going for refuge. Like we can almost maybe admire gupa. A respect, that's what it is. Gupa is respect. So we can respect them. I'm sorry about the mistranslation. We can respect them, but not go for refuge to them. Respect. It's important that all religious traditions are chambo, good to one another, friends. Good to one another. Friends. All of the religious traditions have been so beneficial to beings. But going for refuge is different. So when we look at going for refuge and the reasons for our object of refuge, it's different.
Shiba is Hajila Johnson Rus, and then Latun Pinja Namachazum Namachan when you
when we look at a being such as Shiva, we find in the story of the two brothers who go to Shiva and find that Shiva is going for refuge to Buddha. And then the brother wrote the praise of the Exalted One. So we find these stories and these explanations and reasons.
And the Saja Bennett, when now you can so Gangalo and Ruby Land Jores, she will be number to Gangalo and then one should humor Jason to those, one should humor. How one should humor Sabeng, Mel now you dile, and then now you can the Sans of Ruby Land Jores, Long Loba, Ron Jores.
Rest.
She will be number to Gangalo, one should humor. Jason Rogos, Sabeng Laudua. In Tanzan, Shiba de Chenrezig Juba Yisosayo, Chenrezig Juba, Pebig, the Sontaning and Gudel, Tajivala Shasalos, Tajiba the Wanshuman. And the Tibu Summer number, Chu Tajiba Wanshu Shasana, Jandu Hazard and Gating Dusana, Shiba de do the Samatu Gazo. Jiden wants you to buy in some waters, Jadu rather than get a marriage. Jiden wants she as a mother. Jiden wants she as all location.
So there are some texts that say that Shiva is an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. So there are times where we find this explanation, but in Sakyapandita's text, we find that there are those who claim to be practitioners but follow perverted pathways taught by beings like such as the Shivites, or by the perverted pathways taught are lost on perverted pathways such as those taught by Shiva. So we find though that in this case Sakyapandita is speaking in this way, but in other cases in text we find that Chenrezig to be an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. And anything I missed in that quote I apologize for, but that is the pith of the quote. So in the sutra text we find that it states that the Shiva, in some sutra texts we find Shiva to be an emanation of Chenrezig. So maybe, whether Jesus is an emanation of Buddha, we don't know. We can't say. So we can't say.
Yeah. That was Jesus.
So we're out of time. Triwa dirube. Triwa dirube.
Okay.
What's happening is that there's a lot of discrimination.
Burma Nutra Yure.
What is happening now in Burma is there's a lot of discrimination about towards the Muslims there, and some of the discrimination is actually happening from Buddhist monks who are actually committing violence against Muslims in Burma, and it breaks my heart. And I wonder if Rinpoche has some guidance about how to understand this.
Absolutely. Burma la. The Nampi Drapa, the Mambo, Kache, the Zingdu, Kache, the Muslim Zingdu, and Chiran Labcha Yurube, the Yabudu, the Chua Yabudu Yabumari Yomari, the Chiran Labcha Yurube, Gangisana, Nampa Drapa, the Burma la, the Kache, Mambo, the Zingdu, Tanda.
That Mama goes to Naru, Kacha, Namak, Nesu Takuma, Kachu, Namal never did the
So I don't know. In Burma, what the Muslims have done to the Buddhists, what the Buddhists are doing to the Muslims internally, the actual situation that's happened over the years, I don't necessarily know well, so can't comment. It's best to become friends, to become friends.
Mazilin Lakaji Dundala, Mazilin Dontraji Saison, Hindu, Mazilin.
In India, we see the problem with the Hindus and the Muslims and the destruction of sites and so forth that happens. And people are always fighting. He says that this is something that shouldn't, but it's not something that we're going to change because people will fight. People will fight.
Yeah.
They have their own they have their own something we're out of our control from their side. They will fight. Got it.
And
then the and then this is so then the Burmese army Rinpoche Song, Rinpoche Gu. So the head of Burma could instruct the military to aid and stop whatever these conflicts are that are going on. So it really starts at the head of the state to get under control these things that are happening. But everywhere we see this, and it won't go away.
야, 다 몰라 보자.
But we need to make good aspirations and prayers. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensu Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the five great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tujiji Rinpoche Gucci Shapi Deno.
원래 터지나.